Welcome to the Biblical Perspectives for Leadership podcast, where timeless biblical truths meet modern leadership. We are thrilled to have you join us on this journey of exploring how biblical principles can guide us in leading with wisdom, integrity, and purpose. Whether you're leading in the church, your workplace, or your community, this podcast is designed to inspire, challenge, and equip you for the road ahead. Let's dive into today's conversation and discover how Scripture shapes the way we lead.
Welcome back to Biblical Perspectives for Leadership. You know we love to go deep on stories from the Bible and see what kind of practical leadership advice we can glean from them.
Right. And like always, we're going to be going beyond just the workplace too, thinking about family, relationships, all that.
Absolutely. So today we're diving into a pretty intense figure, Jezebel.
Yeah, her story in 1 and 2 Kings is full of drama, power struggles.
And some serious leadership lessons, both good and bad, of course.
For sure. And we've got 2 main angles we'll be looking at. First, the historical Jezebel. You know, her actions, her influence.
Like how she went head-to-head with prophets like Elijah.
Exactly. And then we'll shift gears to the idea of a Jezebel spirit in leadership. That's more of a contemporary analysis. But it's about recognizing certain patterns of behavior.
So our mission today is to unpack all this and see how these ancient narratives can offer some insights into challenges we might face in our own lives.
Whether we're leading a team at work or just navigating everyday relationships.
Totally. Okay, so first things first, who was this Jezebel historically?
Well, she was the wife of King Ahab, who ruled the northern kingdom of Israel.
And in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 31, it says, Ahab married Jezebel, the daughter of the king of the Sidonians. And then, get this, he began to serve Baal.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge deal. I mean, bringing in foreign religious practices like that, it was a direct challenge to the worship of Yahweh, God of Israel.
So Ahab's not just making a political marriage here. He's making a statement.
Definitely seems that way. And this story goes on to say in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 33, that Ahab made an Asherah pole too.
Which was a symbol of a Canaanite goddess.
Yeah. The text actually says he did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than all the kings before him.
Wow. Okay, so Jezebel's influence is already pretty clear here.
Oh, for sure. And it just intensifies from there. The Bible story of Jezebel overview mentions that she actively promoted the worship of Baal. I mean, she had 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah eating at her table.
That's from 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 19. You know, it really makes you think about the power dynamics at play here. How did Jezebel hold so much sway?
Right. I mean, was Ahab just easily manipulated, or did he genuinely agree with her? What kind of leader lets their spouse have that much power, especially when it's contradicting the core beliefs of your people?
That's a great question. And of course, this all leads to that epic showdown with the prophet Elijah.
Oh, yeah. 1 Kings chapter 18, the contest on Mount Carmel. Talk about a leadership clash.
Elijah, standing firm in his faith against hundreds of prophets backed by the queen.
It's like the ultimate test of conviction versus conformity. I mean, imagine the pressure Elijah must have felt.
No kidding. So he challenges the prophets of Baal to this contest to prove whose God is the real deal.
And of course, Yahweh, God of Israel, wins, hands down, fire from heaven, the whole shebang.
But then in 1 Kings chapter 19, we see Jezebel's reaction.
Oh man, she does not take it well. I mean, Elijah just humiliated her prophets, basically proved her wrong in front of everyone.
And what does she do? Sends Elijah a message threatening his life.
Talk about holding a grudge. It's in 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 3. So much for being a gracious loser.
This is where we see that darker side of Jezebel's leadership. Intimidation, refusal to acknowledge any authority higher than her own.
I mean, think about what kind of message that sends to the people. If you question the queen, your life is at stake.
It's definitely a leadership style rooted in fear and control.
Absolutely. And it worked, at least in the short term. Elijah gets scared and runs for his life.
So even a prophet as powerful as Elijah can feel fear. It's human.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even though he flees, Elijah never backs down from his beliefs. His fear doesn't make him compromise his integrity.
That's a good point. Running from a threat doesn't mean giving up on what you stand for.
Right. It's more about strategic retreat, living to fight another day, you know.
But Jezebel's not done yet. We see more of her leadership style in the story of Naboth's vineyard.
Oh yeah, 1 Kings chapter 21. This one's a doozy.
So King Ahab wants this vineyard that belongs to a guy named Naboth.
But Naboth's like, nope, this land has been in my family forever, not selling.
Which, you know, fair enough. He's within his rights.
Totally. But Ahab doesn't take it well. He's moving around the palace, basically throwing a tantrum.
And Jezebel's like, hold my wine.
Seriously. She sees Ahab sulking and decides to take care of it herself. But her way of taking care of it is pretty messed up.
She basically frames Naboth, accuses him of blasphemy, gets him stoned to death.
It's just cold-blooded. And it's also Ahab can have his vineyard.
This is where we see how power can corrupt even someone in a position like Jezebel's.
Totally. She's so used to getting what she wants, she's lost any sense of justice, any empathy for others.
And it's interesting, Elijah actually confronts Ahab about this. In 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 23, he prophesies that both Ahab and Jezebel will meet a terrible end.
Yeah, talking about karma.
Yeah.
Their actions have serious consequences, not just for themselves, but for their entire lineage.
And in 2 Kings chapter 9, that prophecy comes true. Jehu, the new king, is on a mission to wipe out Ahab's family.
And Jezebel knows what's coming. But instead of, showing remorse, asking for mercy,
she dresses up, puts on makeup, and taunts Jehu from a window.
as if daring him to do something about it. It's like she's still trying to control the situation, even at the very end.
But Jehu doesn't hesitate. He orders his men to throw her down, and she dies.
It's a pretty brutal end, but the way she faces it, without any regret, it's almost like a final confirmation of her character.
So that's the historical Jezebel, a powerful, complex figure who definitely left her mark on history.
For sure. But now let's switch gears a bit and talk about this idea of a Jezebel spirit in leadership.
This is where we move from the specific person to a broader pattern of behavior.
Right. It's not about demonizing individuals, but recognizing these toxic tendencies that could pop up anywhere.
So according to the contemporary analysis, this spirit is all about control, manipulation, undermining legitimate authority.
Yeah. And it often uses spirituality as a cover, like twisting scripture to justify selfish actions.
And it preys on people's insecurities. It uses flattery, gossip, even mood swings to get its way.
And the really dangerous thing is it can be subtle. Like you might not even realize you're being manipulated.
So what are some signs that this kind of spirit might be at work, either in ourselves or in others?
Well, one thing is an obsession with control, like needing to have a hand in everything, micromanaging to the extreme.
And often it'll come disguised as helpfulness or concern.
Right. But the underlying motivation is about power, not actually wanting to help.
Another sign is constantly undermining other leaders, sowing seeds of doubt, questioning motives.
It's like they can't stand to see anyone else in a position of authority. They always have to be the one calling the shots.
And then there's the spiritual manipulation, using personal revelations to justify going against established leadership.
It's like saying, God told me to do this, even when it contradicts what everyone else knows to be true.
And then there's the emotional intimidation, giving people the silent treatment, flying off the handle over small things.
Basically creating a climate of fear so that people are afraid to speak up or challenge them.
And lastly, there's the whole building a tribe thing, like gathering a group of followers who share their grievances.
Often using flattery and promises to gain their loyalty. It's all very calculated and self-serving.
So what do we do if we see these signs? I mean, how do we address this kind of spirit?
Well, first of all, we can't just ignore it. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, Jesus actually rebukes a church for tolerating a woman called Jezebel.
So clearly it's something that needs to be addressed head on.
Yeah, but it's got to be done carefully. The goal isn't to demonize the person, but to confront the behavior.
So like setting clear boundaries, holding them accountable for their actions.
Exactly. And sometimes, if they refuse to change, you might have to remove their influence altogether.
That's tough. But sometimes it's necessary to protect the well-being of the group.
It is. And on a more personal level, we can break agreement with this spirit through prayer.
That's a good point. We don't have to be passive victims. We can actively resist these negative influences.
And 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 reminds us that God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control.
So we can tap into that power to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
And ultimately, it's about building a culture of honor and respect, celebrating servant leadership, not manipulative power grabs.
Okay, so we've talked about Jezebel's historical story and this idea of a Jezebel spirit. What are some key takeaways for our own lives?
Well, I think the biggest one is that unchecked ambition can lead us down a dangerous path, whether it's in our careers, our relationships, or even just our personal goals.
It's so easy to get caught up in getting what we want that we lose sight of what's truly important.
Yeah, and Jezebel's story is a cautionary tale about what can happen when we prioritize our own desires above all else.
We also see how power can corrupt. I mean, Jezebel started out as a princess, but her thirst for power led her to commit some truly terrible acts.
It's a reminder that we all need accountability. We need people in our lives who can call us out when we're straying from our values.
And we need to be willing to listen to them, even when it's hard.
Absolutely. And finally, I think the concept of a Jezebel spirit gives us a framework for recognizing and addressing toxic behavior patterns.
Whether we're dealing with a difficult boss, a manipulative friend, or even those tendencies within ourselves.
It's about paying attention to those red flags, setting boundaries, and refusing to be controlled.
And remember, it's not about labeling people, but about addressing the behavior.
Right. We can have grace for people while still holding them accountable for their actions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that the story of Jezebel offers some powerful lessons for us all.
It's a story about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the corrupting influence of power, and the importance of standing up for what's right.
And it's a reminder that those lessons aren't just for kings and queens. They apply to all of us in every area of our lives.
So as you go about your day, your week, think about the areas where you might be tempted to compromise your values for the sake of power or personal gain.
And consider how you can cultivate a spirit of humility, integrity, and service in your own life.
Because ultimately, that's the kind of leadership that leaves a lasting positive impact on the world.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive into biblical perspectives for leadership.
Until next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Biblical Perspectives for Leadership podcast. I hope today's insights have encouraged and equipped you to lead with faith, wisdom, and purpose. Remember, the greatest leader of all time taught us that true leadership is about serving others. If you enjoyed this episode and podcast, be sure to subscribe, share it with others, and leave a review. It helps us reach more people with these transformative truths. Until next time, keep leading with grace and walking in purpose.